In the early 1980s, Scientology was going through a corporate sort out. This was because of the failures of the Guardian's office to get tax-exempt status, and also because of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's raid on Scientology due to their infiltration of the United States government. One of the corporations that was set up is called Author Services Incorporated, and it was set up to handle L. Ron Hubbard's books, fiction and nonfiction, and also projects like movie scripts or anything like that, and his personal finances. And it was set up separate from Scientology because the IRS was coming after Hubbard, saying that the whole reason he was connected to Scientology and that he was running things was because he was financially benefiting from that relationship. Well, Author Services was set up to separate him from the Church of Scientology. Well, in the early 1980s, Homer Schomer actually was hired and moved over from the Sea Organization into Author Services as the Treasury Secretary. This is part 2 of an interview we did with Homer Schomer. First, we're going to talk to him about his time in Clearwater, where he was in charge of a large department in the Finance Bureau for the Flag Land Base. And then we're going to talk to him about his time in Author Services, which eventually ended up with him being abused physically, emotionally, and mentally, and spat on. Stay tuned, and I think you'll find this video informative. Aloha, everybody. Welcome back to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm here with my co-host, Janice Gillum-Grady. Aloha, Janice.
G'day, Mark. You know, it's cold today. I'm wearing a sweater. It's like 47 degrees.
Yeah, that's cold in Vegas, and we're getting near to Thanksgiving. When you guys see this, it'll be around Thanksgiving time. But yeah, it's chilly. Yeah. We went from warm to cold, and of course, you just got back from your cruise, so it's very warm down there.
Right. Yeah. Now, I just want to say I have a lot of guests in my house, so if you hear noises in the background, it's because of my guests, and I take no responsibility for them. Okay. I locked the doors because Elizabeth and her little friend were bringing a tent into my office as we were about to start. So hopefully everything will be smooth. I'm apologizing beforehand if it's not. So
that's great. Well, we've got a return guest. We did an interview with him before you went on your cruise, and it was very well received. And Janice, why don't you introduce our guest again? He's here to tell the rest of his story.
We have Homer Schomer back. So let's bring on Homer. And I want to start our story with Homer off. In my books, I've talked about how we've been tracked at the different ports we go to. We're tracked by the British embassies and the American embassies, and they chatter back and forth. And when we disappear out to sea anchor for like 6 weeks, they're like, where are we? And they're looking for the mystery ship Apollo. Well, and when we cross the Atlantic, which is close to where we finished off talking to Homer in the last story, when we crossed, we tried to give the impression we were heading south to Africa coast. But we went across to Bermuda, and then we tried to go to the U.S., but they knew we were coming. So we then went down to the Caribbean. And Homer has a good story to show they were still tracking us. So let's bring Homer on.
Okay, here we go. Hi, Homer. How you doing?
Hi, everybody.
It's good to see you. Homer. You're looking well.
Good to see you.
So, Homer, let's start with the story of you continued working with the musicians and setting up their gigs when we were in the Caribbean, just like you did when we were in the Mediterranean.
Right. And I always, did a very good job. I used to get front page acknowledgments by LRH of the gigs that we had in mostly all the ports, which was very good for me. I always enjoyed that. And I won't say the last port, but one of the ports we were in Barbados, I had rented a little apartment right on the beach, and I was having breakfast or something, and all of a sudden I got a call from the commissioner of police, and he said, "Mr. Schomer, I'd like you to have a meeting with you in my office as soon as possible, and could you please come here?" And I said, "Okay, I'm just finishing breakfast. I'll be there in a couple hours." He says, "No, I mean immediately. I'll have a squad car pick you up in 15 minutes and bring you in." So I said, "Okay, sir, that's fine." And I hurriedly got dressed and met the police car in front of me, in front of my residence at that time, and went to his office. And I had become good friends with the commissioner because we had a lot of gigs scheduled in Barbados, and for both the Apollo Stars, the Apollo Star Dancers, the Paco and John, and the one that Norman Starkey was in, I forget.
Troubadours.
The Troubadour,
The Troubadours,
right?
yeah.
Exactly. And he began to saying, "We enjoyed having you here," and he made extra mention about you. But sadly, I have to tell you that your ship and any remaining people that are planning on coming to the island are not welcome anymore. And I advise you to immediately telex your ship or whoever you're in touch with and notify them that they're not available to be docked here, and wherever they are to turn around and not come to our port. And I tried to get the reason why, and he said, "Well, that just is sort of political. I can't really discuss that." And, we had a few other words, and I went back, went outside, and the port captain was there, and I asked him if I could use his telex machine, and I telexed them that the ship was no longer to be available to be docked in the port of Barbados, and what should my future things be. Yes, Mark.
Where was the ship at the time? Was it out at sea, Janice, and you were based in Barbados, Homer?
No, we went to all the different ports in the Caribbean, but Homer would go. He went to Barbados. He was like an advance man, so he would be there earlier and setting gigs up. So like, what, you were in Barbados for how long? 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he rented an apartment on the beach and as a place to stay while he was doing all the gig setups. And he did that on the various islands.
Okay.
And then, I forget what the time frame was, but I got a telex back that to take a plane to Puerto Rico and to San Juan, and there'll be somebody there to meet you and bring you back to the ship. And I asked the port captain if he had any information. He said it really wasn't available to him either. And he was sorry, that we couldn't visit the port. I mean, I had been out drinking with him the night before. So, we were pretty good buddies. And so anyway, I gathered my stuff and I left the next day for Puerto Rico. And I don't remember who I met there, but it was basically, I landed, met the two guys that were, on mission to bring me back to the ship. And we boarded another plane within a couple hours. And I can't remember what port, we went to or how we got back to the ship, but that happened. So that was one of.
Homer, that reminds me of a funny story when I was returning to the ship and I had to go through Puerto Rico to go to Trinidad. And I was there with Foster Tompkins and Alan Buchanan. And we're about to board our plane. We go and we check in and they say, they're like me, I can't go to Trinidad. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't go to Trinidad? Oh, no, you're not allowed in Trinidad. And so the three of us ended up in Puerto Rico for the night with no money except for just enough to buy one pizza and stay at a small little Airbnb. And then the next day we show up again. And meanwhile, Foster's been on a telex to the ship saying they won't let Janice come to Trinidad. And then we're there to get the next plane because there's only one flight a day. And then the guy he's saying, no, I can't go. And we're fighting it. And the ship sends in a telex saying to let her through. They've coordinated with Trinidad. And then the guy comes out finally and says, oh, I'm sorry. It's South Africans, not Australians that can't go to Trinidad. So when I arrived in Trinidad, they gave me red carpet service and had me picked up at the airport and escorted all the way through immigration and customs and taken to the ship.
That's really funny.
That is a funny story. That is a funny story. There you go. You look good there, Homer.
I'm just trying to get my eyes set. It seems like my eyes are always pointing down, but okay.
There you go. That's better right there.
That's better.
So how much longer, Janice? You guys were then cruising around the Caribbean for a while, and then eventually you guys
only a year.
Right? A year?
Well, only a year we were in the Caribbean, but as Homer points out, we kept getting kicked out of ports because of the British influence in Barbados. They're British ruled, and the Bahamas were also British, and the Virgin Islands. We didn't go to the Virgin Islands; those were Americans, so we stayed away from that, and we started going mostly Dutch and French islands. Curacao, Aruba, Bonaire, Dominican Republic. But we were staying away from the British and the American islands there because they were tracking us wherever we went. And then after Hubbard had ended up in hospital in Curacao, and Mary Sue also hadn't been doing well physically, Mary Sue said we were going to move ashore because in case something happened to Hubbard while we were at sea. Well, LRH was more of, we're going to move ashore so I can give Mary Sue a good home. So each of them kind of blamed the other as to why we're moving ashore. And the Guardian's office was put on projects trying to locate places for us. And we had to find a hotel and another building. So we had berthing and we had office space. So they were checking the whole east coast of the U.S. as to where there was something. And it had to have an international airport. And then finally, the missionaires found the Fort Harrison for sale and the Clearwater Bank building. And Hubbard specifically said, is there an international airport? Yes, there is, sir. So it's like, great, let's do the deal. And so everyone's then moved to Daytona. And you know what? Hubbard was very mad later on because Tampa, at that time, its international airport was one flight a week to Mexico. There was no international airport except for that flight. So anyway, that's how we ended up in Clearwater. But Homer, did you stay on the ship after all the people left the ship, or you went to Daytona with us?
Well, I remember on the ship, I think did we have a staging area, or some people went to the Bahamas, or there was some state sort of where we went one place and then another place. And then I think we went to Daytona. We were in Daytona for several months, I remember. And I don't think we ever knew, it was sort of secret about the Fort Harrison. And all of a sudden, it was widely known that we were going to be going to the Fort Harrison and to Clearwater. And then, there was sort of like a whole ship mission to pack up things that we had in Daytona and get trucks and to move everybody to the Fort Harrison. I remember I was a truck driver of one of the, trucks. And of course, we had the Fort Harrison and we had the bank building, which was down the street where a lot of the office would be. I know my office, I was the director of RAM. And so that's where my office, the GEO was in there. I think some of the programs bureau was in there. And several other.
What was RAM? What did RAM stand for?
Records, assets, and material. So
right.
I was responsible supposedly for all the records of the base, all the material, and all the assets. And of course, one of my biggest jobs was the banking officer. So every Thursday when stats were in, the flag banking officer would bring down the banking, our weekly FP, financial planning for the whole base. And, this was many tens of thousands of dollars. And I then had to put it in several banks because at that time, you could only have $40,000 in any one bank in order for it to be insured by the FDIC, Federal Insurance.
Yeah.
Something.
Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation or whatever.
Right. And sometimes I had $100,000 and it's like, so that meant 2.5 banks, but then in 1 week, that bank could be full, and I'd have to find another bank. And I think at one time I had about 40 banks. And not only in Clearwater, then I had to go to Dunedin, I had to go to Tampa, I had to go to almost to St. Petersburg to open up accounts, and all of a sudden
No, I was going to ask you. So, like when you say 40 different banks, that's like not just 40 different branches of one bank.
They did not have branches then.
Oh, okay. So you had to find individual banks to actually put. And then did you have to deposit cash? How did you get the money there?
Well, I had checks. It wasn't cash. But then luckily I had a car, so. And sometimes the flag banking officer in liaison with the GEO Finance Bureau, Wendell Reynolds at the time, were sort of late in bringing the money to me. But then I had to really scurry to go off in all directions to deposit these money in the banks. And it's like going into the bank, and sometimes I'd be opening up an account and depositing $40,000 in that bank,
Right.
Fortunately,
before 2 p.m. on Thursday.
Before 2 p.m. on Thursday, right. And fortunately, I don't remember exact date, but before I sort of left Clearwater on another job, I think they did allow branches, and which was then another problem because now 2 banks, which I had $40,000 in, I think I forget what the amount is that was the FDIC amount for insurance, but sometimes I had to close one bank because it became part of another bank. Otherwise, So I really had a headache at times, you know.
And of
And
course, this is before ATM cards or ATM machines or
way,
electronic
way, way
transfer.
before that time.
What, you had to do a wire transfer, right? There were no electronic transfers, right?
No.
Now, all you were banking, though, was U.S. money, right? Because all the European money had to be deposited overseas and not enter the U.S. to avoid taxes.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with non-U.S. money. It was money that was, you know, definitely money. I'm not sure where I guess it was flag banking officers' funds, and I don't remember exactly what bank she had the money in that she could then give me the checks, but it was quite an endeavor. And also in Clearwater, we had a lot of FCCIs. I forget what that meant, but these were public that came for services, and a lot of them had to set up bank accounts, or they had to cash checks, and they would go to the local banks, and the only way that they could actually cash a check, usually we go to the Bank of Clearwater, was if I countersigned it. And I remember this one time, the one vice president of the bank was talking to the guy that was cashing the check, one of the FCCIs. He said, "Oh yeah, Mr. Schomer signed this check. It's good. He'd probably be good if he signed a piece of toilet paper, you know." So I was very well known at the Bank of Clearwater. I think that was the main bank in Clearwater at the time. So, and that was next to down the street from the bank building.
Well, I wanted to describe this building because this was the old Bank of Clearwater headquarters. And of course, they sold it to Scientology. And then, like you said, they moved down the street into like a high rise, right? It was like a high rise building.
Right.
But this building this is what it looked like back in those days before now. It's been renovated now, right? But I'll never forget, because like that main door right there, that was like the lobby area. And when I was there, that was kind of the staff training area. But then there were all these different little passageways and staircases that I remember. And there were safes in this building because it had been a bank building, right? Right, Homer?
Huge vaults and safes. I mean, with, huge safes, with combination locks and so forth. Yeah. And I had two of them in my office, a big one and a smaller one, but where it would store most of the admin supplies and stuff. So
yeah, I remember going to get admin supplies in one of the safes, and then also when we went to get paid, we got paid Saturday afternoon. I don't remember what time, but we got paid every Saturday afternoon, and we'd go up to your office, and Bob Harry, I think, was the payroll officer.
Right,
and he'd be in one of those safes, and
he'd be in another office with a safe.
Yeah, and then you get this invoice with $17. And 2 dimes taped to the invoice because we got paid $17.20 a week. And then we would all get our money and walk down Cleveland Street to go, buy stuff at McCrory's or whatever. But I'll never forget getting 2 little dimes taped to, for all the staff. They all had to get those dimes taped to the invoices.
And he actually had to separate out for every staff member exact cash for each staff member. So when we go to the bank when he would go to the bank to get the money for the payroll, it would have to be exact amount of dimes, pennies, nickels, whatever it was,
$5 bills, $10.
So it could be divvied up into enough for each staff member, which was a pain for him. And it was actually a pain for the bank too, but that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
Right. Well, when we were in Daytona and Hubbard was running all the different missions to move everything, to purchase the Fort Harrison and the Clearwater building and to move everything over there. And myself, David Mayo, and Hannah Eltringham were sent on mission by Hubbard to Clearwater, and we did the space planning for both those buildings. So the three of us got to go through that whole Clearwater building and go and explore all those tunnels you're talking about. And nobody else was there. It was totally empty. And to me, it was, I'd lived on a ship for 8 years, so, and before that, I was just a kid. So it was a big deal to me to walk into these vaults and see how thick those doors were. It was just new, and the same as with the hotel, with the Fort Harrison. That was a new experience, the Jack Tar, blankets everywhere. and just to go through all those rooms. So anyway.
Yeah.
It was definitely an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Homer, how long were you then in the flag? You were in the Flag Service Org as the director of RAM. How long were you there doing that?
Well, I left there in January of 1980. I think we went to Clearwater from Daytona in maybe 1975 or something. So it was about
December.
It was about 5 years, and I was trying to get out of the FSO, out of being the director of RAM, but in order to get from one post to the other post, you have to have a replacement. And I was trying to get to the GO B1, which was the
intelligence
intelligence info,
yeah.
the bureau over in England at St. Hill, which I think one or two times I was approved, but it was a problem of getting me a replacement. But all of a sudden, I found out that I was also wanted as the Treasury Secretary for this new organization called Author Services, ASI, in Los Angeles. And Fran Harris was there. David Miscavige was actually the CEO, you might say. Terry Gillum was the president. So she was under David Miscavige, and there was only about 15 to 16 of us there. And this corporation was a profit corporation. And it ends up that we were running the church because all information going to Hubbard would go through Author Services to LRH through Pat Broker,
Right.
who would come in at the middle of the night, disguised, and then he would take it back to the secret ranch up by San Luis Obispo, and but
Where were you located? When you first went to Author Services? I know they had an office building or office suites on Sunset Boulevard, but did they have a place before that or no?
Before that, it was in the building that PubSorg was in along Franklin Avenue.
Okay.
And PubSorg had moved into the blue building. Of course, all the buildings there were blue. And we had the upper floor of it. And
behind AOLA, the Advanced Organization.
Right, exactly behind AOLA. And then maybe 6 months later, we rented out the 9th floor of some office building in downtown Hollywood.
Yeah, on Sunset Boulevard. Yeah.
On Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
And which was a public building. I mean, there were other offices there and so forth. And
and Author Services, for our viewers, we've said this in other videos, but it was like he said, it was the for-profit corporation supposed to be handling Hubbard's, monetary, like his books and his money and his investments and his movies and all these other things that, where he would make money, because the IRS was trying to prove that Hubbard was taking all his money from Scientology and from the church. So this was sort of set up as sort of an arm's length or corporation, so they could say, no, I'm handling everything over here. But of course, we all know it was a lie, because Miscavige and everybody, they just went into the church and Hubbard did what he wanted to anyway. It was just a facade.
Well, they still took church money and would, take that into author services to pay his commissions or his royalties and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, one story, backtracking a little bit, was that the ship, the Apollo, was owned by Operation and Transport Corporation, OTC.
Right.
And anybody that was on the ship was paid by invoices OTC on them, which wasn't really a legal entity of the Church of Scientology of California. So at one point, I think when I guess they decided to sell the ship and so forth, but months before that, there was a mission that came in and had to rewrite all these invoices from OTC to Church of Scientology of California. I think Ellen Clayman Reynolds was ahead of that with her husband. And Marty, the CPA.
Greenberg. Marty Greenberg.
Marty Greenberg, right. And his partner, I forget what his partner.
Jim Jackson.
Were on the ship doing that particular thing. And there was one thing not too long ago that I was thinking, well, if that was a secret mission, and I don't know how they got their IRS exemption, if that thing would have been known. But apparently I had talked to Mike Rinder, and he said that was all sort of part of the scheme of things when Miscavige got the IRS to give the exemption to the church at that time. Right. So that was sort of washed out, because I thought that would have been a big thing.
What was your job at Author Services? You were the Treasury Secretary. Like, what did your job entail there? What did you have to do?
Well, mainly, all the finances. One of my biggest jobs was this chart that I would put on this accounting chart paper that had to go up to LRH every week, which showed all of his assets. And, once a week I'd have to call to not Luxembourg, but what's the others? One of the other cities?
Zurich.
And I had my voice recognized by one of the officers in the bank, one of the banks there, and he would give me the up-to-date interest on the money so I could update this chart. And also if there was any jewels or paintings or artifacts that LRH owned that I'm not sure where the possession of it was. I think it was at the ranch with Pat Broker, but that had to be included too. And I know that was one of the big things in the Jerry Armstrong trial that I mentioned, that I did this, and I sort of never told anybody at the time that I didn't. I sort of made insinuendos that I still had a copy of it, of one of them, and that didn't go too well with whoever was doing the trial at that time. But I never did have a copy. I wish I would have, but that was one of the biggest thing that I had to do, and do any payment of the staff for Author Services. We'd actually get bonuses there, and maybe made a couple $100 a week, and probably every couple of weeks, Miscavige would take us out to some restaurant, to celebrate something. And every Wednesday, usually, Wendell Reynolds, who was the
international
Director.
finance dictator at the time. Yeah.
Dictator, right. And also the worldwide finance director, I forget what his name was.
Herbie Parkhouse.
No, not Herbie,
No.
Herbie. I later remember him because he was being commented when I was being rooted out or trying to get out. But they would come to Author Services, and with Fran Broker, they would try to figure out how much money that they could get out of the church coffers and Sea Org reserves that they would give to Hubbard. And it was a lot of things that he had said even in HCOBs or HCOPLs, the administrative papers, of what he had forsaken and given to the church. He was taking all this money back, so secretly, of course.
Well,
Right.
any policy letter that he wrote, they charged the Church of Scientology for that policy letter. Any flag order, anything he wrote, they started charging.
Anything, because that was our statistics of Author Services was money into his coffers, and I think at that time I had figured it was about $1 million a week, and that was up to late November or beginning November when I was on post. So after that, it must have been even more so, and of course, during that time I think it was probably in August or September, I had a hernia operation and I was off post for a week or so. Not one Author Services staff member came to visit me in the hospital. And I was getting pretty discontented and in my own self, I wanted to leave. And I got talked out of it by Vaughn Young's ex-wife,
Stacy,
who was the Author Services org officer.
Right.
And but then I still wanted to leave, type of thing, but I wasn't voicing it. But every time we would go out to INT on Thursday after stats, I'd get sec checked by somebody, and then one Thursday night, Miscavige got everybody into this one room and I was sitting in a hallway backed up into where a door was behind me, so I couldn't go out, and it was a narrow hallway, so I couldn't go forward, and all the staff were in front of me, and Miscavige and Norman Starkey were in front of me, and I was getting a gangbang sec check, otherwise a sec check, but everybody in the staff was there, participating, so to speak. And that's where, Miscavige and Starkey both sort of spit in my face. And that was like, the end of me being in Author Services. They were, saying that, who was I talking to with the FBI or the IRS or whatever, because
they thought you were a spy. They thought you were a government spy.
That I was a spy. Stats were down that week or something, and then
Yeah.
Who was it that was handling the meter? Who was it that was handling the meter while you were holding the cans?
I don't remember at the time.
Okay.
But every Thursday night after stats in Author Services, we'd have a meeting, a staff meeting, and then we would go out to INT. We drive out there, and we'd sit in this one room and write up our reports or finish our reports for the week. And these reports would be looked over by Miscavige, and then Pat Broker would be there, and we didn't see him. He was in another room, and they would go, Miscavige or somebody would go back and forth correcting our reports so that it wouldn't look alarming to Hubbard.
Yeah, and then they were sent to Hubbard, right?
Yeah,
And then Broker would take them back.
So they were the ones actually creating the false reports to Hubbard, because people like Homer would just write the report as it was, and then they didn't think that it was good enough or it would cause alarm and upset, so they then changed the reports to false reports and make it look better. They'd
have us rewrite it as how they wanted it to say, you know.
Right.
And then for several weeks I was, held under guard, and when the next week when everybody would go to INT, I would go to INT also and be sec checked and so forth. And then there was one, I think then the following week, they had gone, the whole staff had gone to INT, and they didn't take me there, and they put me in guard in my room, because all the author services staff had, private rooms in the blue building.
Right.
And I had some guardian personnel guarding me, and I had a private bathroom. And the next one night I went to sleep, and he would sleep at the door with a mattress right at the door, so I couldn't get out without going through him. And one morning I was taking a shower, and he sort of yelled in, "Hey, Homer, I've got to go change clothes. I'll be back in a few minutes." See, these guys didn't know sort of who I was. They didn't know too much about author services. They didn't know why, or even
why he was watching you. Yeah.
Why he was watching me. And of course, when he left, I jumped out of the shower wet. I got my clothes on as fast as possible. And I had a car, and of course they had confiscated the car earlier. And but I had found out the combination of how to get into the garage across the street. And that was before that. No, that was afterwards. Anyway, I still had my car, and I jumped in my car and I drove to a friend's house in West LA. And then the next day took a plane to Florida where my brother lived. And I was there for a week or so. And of course, Terry and even my daughter were trying to get me to come back. And of course, I said I refused to. And for some reason, I decided to come back. I guess one of the reasons was that I had a couple $1,000s in an investment that I had made along with Hubbard, with one of my staff members. And I wanted that money because I didn't have any money. So I, left Florida and got on a plane back to Clearwater. It was so happened that, or not to Clearwater, to Los Angeles. Right. It so happened that on that same plane in Tampa was Rendell Reynolds going back to Los Angeles at the time. And we didn't sit together, but he sort of helped escort me as I got out of the plane in LA to get back to the blue building, where I was not under ComEv but under house arrest. And for a couple of weeks I was just at night I'd be sleeping in a GO's room with somebody at the door, but there were other GO members there, and working on some woodworking stuff with a couple other GO members that were under ComEv. And I had told them that if I didn't tell my sister, who lived in Boulder, Colorado, if I didn't call her every night at 7:00 sharp, that she was going to call the LA Police Department and tell them that I was kidnapped, which they allowed me to do. And but I had gained the trust of these two guys that were holding me sort of captive. And during that time, I had gotten my car back. I'd gotten the combination to the parking spots where the car was. I'd even convinced them that I was okay to leave in a couple of days. They went with me to get a U-Haul to pack whatever stuff I had at the Blue Building. And then a day or two later, their comment started, and they were not guarding. There was nobody guarding me anymore. So I just took off and landed up with my sister in Boulder, Colorado for a year or so.
I've got a few questions I'd like to ask you, follow up, based on what you were doing when you were at Author Services. I remember when you guys would come up to the Gilman Hot Springs and to write up the weekly reports to go up to Hubbard, right? And that's what you were talking about, them going back and forth, and Miscavige and Pat Broker reviewing them and then sending them up and all that sort of thing. I remember that very well. So Hubbard got reports every week, right? Like, did he give you instructions back? Did you get things back telling you what?
Sometimes it was just a thank you, or sometimes, why didn't you do this? Or myself, it wasn't any lengthy stuff.
Right.
But he did communicate back to me.
Now, what was your relationship with Lyman Spurlock? Because was he in charge of like investments, or Lyman Spurlock was at Author Services as well, right? At
the time, him and Starkey, they were sort of like in a legal bureau, and Lyman Spurlock was the liaison with the attorneys.
Okay, and then the other question I wanted to ask you about was, there's an incident that Terry, Janice's sister, had mentioned about, an investment in oil wells that Miscavige did that went bad and lost millions of dollars of Hubbard's money. Were you around during that time period?
That was years later.
Okay.
Yeah, that was with, I think Wick Alcock was part of that, because they put the blame on Wick. And instead of themselves taking responsibility, they blamed him.
Yeah.
Did they think you were stealing, or were they threatening you with that, or what was? They thought you were a government agent, obviously, but what?
Well, they were just accusing me. They had no proof.
Right.
Of course, there wasn't any proof, but if the stats are down, somebody has to take the blame for it. And I don't think there was anything specific that got Miscavige riled up. Maybe that I wanted to leave again. That could have been something. I'm not sure.
That's what he looked like in those days in Author Services. Just so people know.
He was really a tyrant. I know that Terry, was actually over Author Services, but he was over her, and
he was the chairman of the board.
In other things, he would really rattle her. And I remember there were times when, her door was shut, and I know she was back there crying or really in distress because she couldn't handle it. And when he was going through the sec check thing, and he was telling the staff all to spit on me or to do something to me, she was probably one of the only ones that refused to do it.
Well, the treatment of you, Homer, is what got her thinking. Because when Deanne told her to go spit on you, she was like, I'm not going to do that. That's disgusting. Why, And that, I think, got her thinking. And then she ends up in trouble and on the decks and having to dig a hole here and then move all the dirt over there. And it was just useless work just to keep her busy digging holes. And then that's when she left. But that, I think, is what opened her eyes, was the treatment of you, of all the it was just BS.
Yeah, she always treated me really good, but of course she was under Miscavige. So, she had to do what she had to do or she was going to get her head kicked in, just, while I was there. So like any other staff member.
When you talk about the stats being up or down, was the pressure on income, like how much money am I getting to Hubbard or how much money was going to Hubbard?
That was our stat, how much money was going into Hubbard's coffers every, that week.
And so those weekly reports or whatever would be, what's going up to, what's happening with my money, what's going on with the money. The other thing I remember too, that's when the staff meetings started too, where we had the flaps and handlings. Janice, you remember this, right? That was modeled after the ASI staff meeting.
Yeah.
Where, it'd be
That's
like,
right.
and then a tape recording would be done of the ASI staff meeting and be sent to Hubbard as well, right? Do you remember that, Homer?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I sort of vaguely remember possibly a tape, but I don't really recollect it.
Okay. And then, of course, they wanted as much money to go to Hubbard as they could. So that's why they were pushing that, right?
Right. That's why Reynolds and this guy from IT would come in.
Mark
and they
Ingram.
would. No, it wasn't him. It was
Okay.
one of the guys under Herbie at the time. And
Was it Don Larson?
no.
No.
Okay.
He was one of the two guys that were being that were really looking over me when I was being sort of being held at the Blue Building.
Yeah, and just so our viewers know, this whole time period, Janice and I remember it because we were up at the Int base. This was the whole time period when Hubbard came back on the lines and there's false stats in all the orgs and everybody was like, who's the plant and who are the spies from the government and spitting, the spitting you're talking about, Homer. Hubbard wrote to Miscavige about John Axel, who had done an evaluation on the Los Angeles organization. Hubbard, didn't like the stats or whatever, something like that. And then Hubbard mentioned in passing, oh, by the way, spit on John Axel for me. And that's what Miscavige did. He actually pulled him out and stood him up and spit in his face. You remember that, Janice?
Yeah, well, I wasn't part of. I think that.
No,
was
I wasn't either,
but
we all know about it.
Yeah, but that was during the whole time period. I was catching gophers on the golf course because I was so disaffected.
Yeah, and I ended up in the RPF during that time too, in LA, with a lot of people from Author Services, like Stacy Young was my twin. I mean, a lot of people got busted. Now,
Homer, you bring up the point of you had the hernia operation in hospital, and nobody came to visit you. That was part of the problem with the Sea Org members. There's like no sympathy for anybody that gets ill or hurt or, it was like you pulled it in. We're too busy trying to clear the planet to pay any attention to you because you're just being a victim.
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty disgusting attitude when you come out in the world and it's like, wow, there's compassion. There is such a thing as being nice to someone, very different.
Of course, I got into Sea Org in my early 30s, so I had already been out in the wild world for many, many years. So it wasn't new to me, that wasn't new to me. But and fortunately, when I was in the FSO and the Durham in Clearwater, I sort of was like autonomous. I almost did whatever I wanted to do. Because I used to go out to dinner with the GO. I used to sit at the GO table, and I remember one time I would go to a muster if I heard that some good news was coming up, and there was one muster I went to that the master of arms said, "Oh, Homer Schomer is here. Wow, I haven't seen him here in about 90 days or something,
Yeah,
and that was
you did have your little fiefdom in that Durham in that Clearwater
right,
building. I remember that, and nobody
right,
messed with you because you did your job. You know what I mean?
right.
There was no reason to mess with you.
Hey,
And even on the
everyone got a paycheck. Homer was in good standing with working with payroll.
and I knew all the FCCIs because I'd sign their checks. So
Right.
and plus when I was in the Apollo
Stars.
group,
Yeah, the Apollo Stars.
and I was the advanced man. I was out by myself, doing my thing. I was doing a good job, but I was on my own. So, except the first couple of times I was with some not Janice, but there was some gal I had. I remember it. She might still be in.
Janet Thompson.
Janet Thompson, right?
Janet Whalen.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me go. We're reaching the end here with this, and I think this is going to be a good place to stop because I'd like to do the next episode about what happened to you after you left. Okay, so we can cover that. But just to finish off what we've been talking about, do you remember like your first encounters with David Miscavige? What was it like working for him or being around him in author services?
It wasn't good because when I came to author services, I was actually the deputy treasury sec. But after 2 weeks, the guy below me, which I can't remember what his name was demoted and I was promoted. And all at that time, and everything after that, every time you saw or heard anything come out of Miscavige's mouth, was nothing good. He was always bitching about something, and it was always your fault and not anybody else's fault. And why are you letting it happen and so forth. Of course, when we were in the building, the old pubs building behind the AO, we're all in this one room. When we were in the one on Sunset in Hollywood, we had offices, so we were a little bit secluded from him. So, but he was an asshole and really a tyrant. He was really hard to work with.
Yeah, and he cursed like a sailor, worse than anybody I've ever heard. He was more creative with curse words than anybody I've ever seen.
Right, but I've thought of things in the past, but it wasn't until Miscavige took over that the way Sea Org members were living and the way Sea Org members, they had liberty. They used to be able to go on leaves and so forth. And Hubbard was, running the show at that time. It was sort of bearable, but after Miscavige took over, it definitely got worse. And I mean, I don't see how it can be any worse than it is now. So,
Right.
I mean,
I
I
understand.
don't. Does anybody ever get leaves now?
I don't hear of it.
No.
I've heard of some people were going to go on leave and then they didn't make it. But I just don't hear of leaves, and you just hear of people not hearing from the Sea Org members.
Right.
So I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we're going to end this episode here, and we'll carry on the next one because we'd love to hear about what happened afterwards, because that's a whole story in itself.
Right.
Homer, thank you for that. I wanted to mention a couple of things here for our viewers here. We are having a 10% Christmas discount on all merchandise on our store, on our merchandise site. Just go down below, click on the merchandise. The promo code is Christmas, and that'll last through Christmas. So if you want to get T-shirts, coffee mugs, or whatever, we're pushing our connection merchandise right now. I designed these hoodies. They've got the word connection with the heart and the two arrows pointing to it, and also sweatshirts. We sold a couple of sweatshirts the other day, so that's good. So anyway, all of this is here, and we also designed this is a cotton cloth tote bag for groceries or whatever, and you can see the connection logo on that. So these are all on there, as well as lots of other merchandise. So anyway, 10% discount for Christmas. Just use the promo code Christmas. And then Janice, we also wanted to mention your daughter's CBD salve, right? The Oracle CBD salve, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, it works great. I mean, I have issues with my left knee, and if I have pain, I just put the salve on it and the pain goes away. So
that's right.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and she's having a Oracle CBD salve, 15% discount. The promo code is November 15, and that's good until November 28th. So if you need to order any CBD salve, it is really good, and it lasts a long time. So anyway, if you want to get that discount, the promo code is November 15, and that's good until November 28th. And that is at her website, which is www.healedbyoracle.com. That's www.healedbyoracle.com. And you can order the CBD salve there. So we just wanted to mention, we have to do a little commerce here.
Thanks for mentioning that. My daughter does appreciate people buying the salve. It gives her some money.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, okay, I just want to also mention, please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button and notification button. If you've got any questions or comments about what we talked about, go down in the comment section down below and we answer them. And if you've got any questions for Homer, you can put them in there and we will definitely ask them on the next show. If you want to support our channel, you can buy us a coffee, buy me a coffee. There's a link in the description and just click on that. And it's a great way to support our channel. Janice and Homer, have you got anything else you want to say before we end the recording?
I think Homer's trying to do a heart.
I am, and how do you do this? How about
there you go?
Well,
I don't know either. But Homer,
one thing is, the Connection black bags is great because in California they're going to do away with all the plastic bags, so that'd be a good thing to pick up your groceries in.
That's exactly right. And the reason we did the connection is just to encourage people to stay connected with people, not disconnect. It's a great gift. You can send it to people still in Scientology that you want. It doesn't have anything saying we're anti-Scientology. It's just connection. And it'll be a great gift for somebody in the holidays. We've got coffee mugs. We've got all sorts of stuff. So anyway.
Even Jehovah's Witnesses, because they also do the same thing and disconnect. So whatever, anyone disconnecting, just connect.
Yeah, connect. Send the love. Anyway, okay, until next time, everybody. Bye-bye. We'll see you later.
Bye.